So let's get started with the painting part. So what I'm interested in doing again is establishing the values and a bit of the temperature. Not as much about local color, but those two things, value and temperature. Now, I've already said that this is going to be the cooler side, this is going to be the warmer side. I want to bring us up to this through these cool lines of shadows and the highlights that come up here and then up and around. So I'm going to start, get a paper towel here, and confession time. I tend to have a pretty heavy hand, so I've got to be very careful, and I try to be mindful that I want to leave as much of this texture and underpainting as I possibly can, especially at first. Some of it is going to have to go away, be sacrificed for the good of the painting. But at least to start with, I want to leave as much of that as I can. The only way to do that is to use a very light touch. So I primarily use Ludwig's. I have some, I have a whole variety. Great Americans, I have Unison, I have lots of different kinds here and there. But Ludwig's are definitely my workhorse. So I am laying it in, I am barely dragging it along the surface. I'm trying to work as generally as I can without putting in really any detail. Again, I'm just blocking things in. I typically work from dark to light, or maybe a mid-tone, mid-value to dark and then light. I have always admired those artists who work very quickly, spontaneously. They lay a color down. It is the perfect color. They put it down, they leave it alone, and you're just kind of awestruck. I'm afraid that's not me. And I learned at one point that it isn't me, that I do like that sense of layering and developing color surface richness. That's one of the things that I really enjoy doing. So it dawned on me to just embrace that. The danger, of course, is that pieces can easily get overworked. I used to tell my students that I always knew when a painting was done, and it was 10 minutes ago. I wish I had that quote was original, but it's not, and I don't even know where it came from, so I can't give credit. But I certainly relate to it anyway. This is kind of a middle value blue-green. I'm putting it on here, laying it on top of these darks. There will be some more darks that go on top of it, but I do like, this is almost the charcoal showing through, but with the color contrast of this teal, dark teal color. The charcoal itself almost looks like a warm green. Now I will switch, and this will be my cooler side of this front vegetation, with this being warmer. In the end, I do want this tree trunk and these limbs close to it to really have a glow. So, of course, to make something look brighter, what do? You lay a dark next to it. If you want a color to look more vibrant, something in the family that is complementary to it oftentimes will do it. Oftentimes will do it. Again, establishing value, and even now doing a little bit of negative painting, establishing maybe some tree trunks. And keep it loose. Working from the general to the specific. Hope I don't get to the specific yet. Working with the broad side of the pastel as much as possible for a couple of reasons. One, it keeps me from getting too detailed, working on too small an area right at first. Covers big areas, and so consequently I can put in general, these big broad brush strokes, and then if I need to go back and add some details, or like a little thing between some limbs, then I can do that later. But I don't want to start with that. Now moving to warmer greens over here, I'm kind of laying some of them on top of that much cooler blue-green. This is here just to test a color or to sharpen an edge if I need one. Of course, you can't have an abrupt change, so we gotta introduce it here and there and pull it over. This will be the warmer side of this front vegetation. So leave it cooler here, start to add some of the warm over here in front. It's got to still be cooler back here. Moving up the value scale a bit. Sometimes that's a little bit of a detail almost, but I want to put it in just to see if I'm headed in the right direction color and value wise. Don't want to do too much of that at this point because I may be wrong. I don't generally do much blending. But occasionally I will. Pulling in some of the warmer middle values over here on this front edge because the light is really kind of going this way and pulling you back this way. Now, because I'm trying to get into the shot a little bit, I'm working a little closer than normal, and of course, that's okay. I don't mind, except that I'm not getting a good view of what I'm doing, and so that stepping back, which we all forget to do, becomes very important. So I'm going to stop for a second, step back, evaluate what I am doing here. Again, I'm laying lighter, warmer greens over here, but trying to keep that light touch so that I let some of that magenta kind of color show through. So let me step back. Okay, so stepping back, I noticed that I have these 4 little soldiers standing at attention right in a row, which just drives me nuts. So I deviated from the reference, which is totally fine. And the reason those wound up that way was the drips when I added the water. But they're just not working. So before I go any further, I am going to alter those. I'm going to get rid of this one. I'm going to change the shape of this a little bit. I am going to sort of lose that and combine a couple of these. Oh, and I'm getting the information idea from my photo records. I'm not following it exactly, but it is giving me interesting information. So I am changing what I have. I'm going to add that this way. Go back in with some of my colors that I had used in some of the other underpainting. kind of tied it all together. Since I don't want it to just stand out completely as something totally different, I'm just going to give it a very light touch of spray with the rubbing alcohol so that it has a closer resemblance to everything else that's gone down. Now, it does create some little speckles here that may drive some people crazy. I like it. It's just another added texture. It speaks to the process of creating this. So, we will leave that for a while. Now, every once in a while, I pick up a harder pastel just because I want to add a little bit of something somewhere, and it kind of blends with the pigment that's already there. So touches of that are fine. Going back to some of these darker colors. I want to knock that back in the distance. That's that cool green again. And that's okay at the bottom of this passage. But as it comes up, I want to move it to the darker, warmer, or the dark, warmer green rather than that cool green. Now, just to establish a little bit of contrast, a little bit of color, looking to see what is happening where and placement of things, I am going to start putting in touches of color over here as well. I want it to all be quite light. You know, you might say, well, that's not a neutral at all. And, you know, in some cases it's not. But I think once I layer a little bit, I think it will come across more neutral than it does. And that's one of the reasons I love that layering. Barely touching, barely touching the surface, dragging it along. As most of you do, I keep a paper towel in my hand, my left hand, and I always wipe it before I make a mark. It always picks up pigment of other colors as it lays down there on my tray. I'll also add touches of color back in here. I'm not really painting all the sky yet, but I want to just indicate the value. I want to indicate the color. I want it to be a little warm back here because I want the sun to shine. I also want this magenta color to show through, because I think that helps tie things together. I always think of, if a color shows up in one place, I like to at least echo it somewhere else. It doesn't have to be exactly the same color. It needs to be within that family. And to me, it's like lacing a painting together. Now, are there times when you want to break that? Absolutely. There's times when you want just that pop of, um, that pop of red on something that really draws your eye. But if it is so unique, that is where your eye will go instead of maybe some of the other areas. So you got to be careful and you got to decide. Okay. So again, not really bringing it to any kind of completion, but it helps me think about what is happening and how it relates to other areas. When I paint, I tend to feel like I work the whole surface. So I work all of the charcoal area up to one level of completion. Then I add the underpainting and bring it up to the next level of completion. Then I start laying the base colors of the softer pastels, and I try to bring all of that up to one layer. So instead of working from top to bottom or left to right like some people do, which is fine, but for me, because I want each color to relate to what's going on in other areas, I feel like I need to work here and then here and then here, because what happens here will affect my perception of the color here. So I feel like I work up to this level, then I work the whole surface up to this level, then up to this level, and this level, until finally I'm looking around and I am adding those final touches, the spice to the food maybe, in those areas. Again, I am not doing any kind of final color anywhere, but I am trying to add a little bit here and there so that I know if I'm getting, kind of in the right ballpark of the color that I think will work, as well as bringing it all up to one level of completion. Yep, that's a new pastel. I picked it up because I felt like it might be the right color that I needed. And then also, because it is hard, it's not going to lay as much pigment down. If I accidentally get a little heavy-handed, it's not going to lay as much pigment down as, say the Terry Ludwig would. I can't let this foreground get so bright that it then detracts from what's going on here. So I have to be a little bit careful thinking in terms of that push and pull. Okay. Step back.